Being 2 p.m, we'll go to questions without notice. Senator Wong.
Mr President, I seek leave to make a statement relating to shadow ministerial arrangements.
Leave is granted. Senator Wong.
I thank the Senate. The Leader of the Opposition has announced the appointment of the Honourable Ed Husick MP as Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Resources following the resignation of the Honourable Joel Fitzgibbon MP. I seek leave to table the revised Shadow Ministry list and to have it incorporated into Hansard.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Payne. I refer to the disturbing report aired by Four Corners last night, which reflected an ongoing culture within the Morrison government of inappropriate and sexist conduct and intimidation. What is the Minister for Women's response?
The Minister for Women, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And at the outset, let me make it very clear that I condemn all inappropriate treatment of people in the workplace, women and men, including relationships that exploit an imbalance in power within a workplace. Every Australian has the right to feel safe in their place of work.
Senator McAllister, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. A message sent by one member of an internal Coalition Women's WhatsApp group said, and I quote, "We, each of us, inspire young women to aim for leadership. How do we continue to do this in the face of puerile backstabbing from male party members whose sole aim is to count numbers and to take our place?" Was the Minister aware of the existence of this WhatsApp group, and has she offered advice to members of this group?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I'm not specifically aware of that WhatsApp group. There are many, as I'm sure those opposite also share. However, I would reiterate what I said in my response to Senator McAllister's first question and indicate that we know well from the Respect at Work inquiry carried out by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, that there are many workplaces in Australia which don't meet the standards that we would hope and expect to see. That includes this parliament, and it doesn't just include the government sides of this parliament. We know that. And so it is for all of us, it is incumbent on all of us, women and men, to address and take responsibility for addressing these issues across the parliament, in the ancillary parts of the parliament, whether that is the press gallery, for other staff, for the entire building and the entire community in which we work, including the political community, Senator. It's not acceptable. I condemn all inappropriate treatment of women, including, as I said, particularly in the workplace.
Senator McAllister, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank the Minister for her answer. What advice has the Minister for Women given the Prime Minister to improve the culture of his government and ensure Liberal women feel safe and can come to work without fear of intimidation or sexism?
Senator Payne.
Sure, Mr President, and I thank Senator McAllister for her question. In fact, in 2018, at the direct request of the Prime Minister, my political party undertook a comprehensive review of its processes for the handling of complaints and dispute resolution to ensure that our party had rigorous and confidential processes in place, as we should. The review resulted in the development of the Liberal Party's first National Code of Conduct and Complaints and Dispute Resolution Policy, both of which were endorsed unanimously by the Federal Executive of the Liberal Party in 2019. These are matters which we took and which we take very seriously. Many other workplaces do not have similar codes or do not have similar dispute resolution policies. Many other workplaces, for example, and other political organisations have not instituted the restriction on sexual relations that former Prime Minister Turnbull instituted, which was maintained by Prime Minister Morrison. We take this very seriously, and it's
Senator
a matter of—
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Van.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Cash. Can the Minister update the Senate on the progress Australia has made containing the outbreak of COVID-19 and how the Australian approach to combating the virus compares internationally allowing Australia to reopen, recover and build a stronger nation.
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Van for what is an incredibly important question. Mr President, since March, Australians have taken extraordinary steps to protect the health of their fellow citizen and, of course, our economy from COVID-19. With Victoria, as Senator Van knows, now coming out of restrictions, we are now at a very important moment, with encouraging signs that we are containing the virus within Australia. Today I'm pleased to update the Senate that for the first time since February, we have had no new cases of community transmission for 3 consecutive days. Globally, there have now been over 50 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and over 1.2 million deaths in total. Sadly, this includes 907 Australians. While any death from COVID-19 is sobering, the hard work of Australians means that when compared with other developed nations with advanced health systems, Australia has performed remarkably well. Over 9.1 million COVID-19 tests have been conducted since January, with 27,674 Australians diagnosed with COVID-19. Of these, Mr President, only 85 cases remain active, with Australia averaging now less than 10 new daily cases over the last week. Globally, new cases have increased by over 565,000 a day over the past 7 days. The results have only been possible, though, because of the early actions the Morrison government took on the basis, as we know, of medical advice. We closed Australia's borders, we secured our testing capacity and, importantly, we invested in contact tracing. And together, Australians and our health authorities, we have achieved these outcomes.
Senator Van, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the Minister advise the Senate on the progress that the Australian government is making towards securing access to a COVID-19 vaccine?
Senator Cash.
And again, thank you, Senator Van. It is an important question. The government has announced 2 new purchase agreements, Mr President, for the supply of promising COVID-19 vaccines. While access to these vaccines is subject to clinical trial outcomes on the safety and effectiveness of each candidate and approval by Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, a diverse vaccine portfolio is a key component of Australia's COVID-19 vaccine and treatment strategy. The new agreements build on the Australian government's existing commitments to the COVAX facility, the University of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the University of Queensland CSL vaccines. To date, the Morrison government has invested more than $3.3 billion across 5 separate agreements with local and international pharmaceutical companies. While there are no guarantees, this is encouraging news coming out of global vaccine trials over recent days.
Senator Van, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. With the welcome news overnight of the promising results being reported of vaccine trials from across the world, how well positioned is Australia to roll out a vaccine and provide enough doses to keep Australians safe?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, the government's 2 new production and supply agreements have secured an additional 50 million doses, securing early access to 134 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine to Australians in 2021-22. And 2020-21. Australians will have access to 33.8 million doses of the Oxford vaccine, 51 million doses of the UQ vaccine, 40 million doses of the Novavax protein subunit vaccine and 10 million doses of the promising Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. All 4 vaccine candidates are likely to require 2 doses per person. CSL has confirmed its Australian manufacturing schedule is on track to produce 30 million doses of Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine candidate, and subject to regulatory approvals, first doses will be ready for use in early 2021.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Finance Minister, Senator Birmingham. I refer to the minister's comments during your appearance on Sky News on the 8th of October when you said, and I quote, "As Finance Minister myself, I will be acutely aware that the quality of spending is what matters when it comes to how we invest." Does handing $444 million of public money to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation meet the minister's quality spending standard?
Minister for Finance, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Gallagher for her question and the question as Minister for Finance. And indeed, those remarks are remarks that I stand by in terms of the importance of the quality of spending. It is crucial across government that we work always to ensure that government spending is targeted where it's necessary to what is necessary. That's been the approach of our side of politics all along. It was that type of approach in terms of making sensible decisions around budget management that enabled us to create an environment coming into this economic crisis that we face right now that had our budget come back to a point of balance. It was through that careful budget management and that economic management that we ensured. Have you looked at the previous budget outcome, Senator Wong? Have you looked at the previous budget outcome, Senator Wong?
Order.
Now, Mr. President, in relation to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, this was an important investment made in an important national asset. The Great Barrier Reef.
Order on my left.
The Great Barrier Reef is a crucial part of our ecology, of our environment, of our tourism industry, and indeed has been central to commitments that we have made to the world
Senator
in terms of the
Keneally.
management that we apply to the Great Barrier Reef. And the support for the Great Barrier Reef Foundation is absolutely about making sure that we get investments ongoing over a period of time across the reef, supporting a range of different measures that will support the health, well-being and resilience of the reef through that time. And that funding we are seeing already now is being applied in practical ways to support the reef, one of our great and appropriate assets.
Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. 83% of the $3 billion allocated from the Urban Congestion Fund, administered by Minister Tudge, has gone into Liberal seats or seats targeted by the Liberal Party. More than one-third went to Liberal seats in Melbourne. Does this $2.49 billion worth of public money meet the minister's standards of quality spending?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, I'm left wondering which projects the Labor Party are against. Which projects, in terms of urban infrastructure or congestion, they think are unnecessary, Mr. President. So those opposite will criticise endlessly about things that they think aren't being done, and yet when indeed the government does decide to invest in the Great Barrier Reef, or does invest in relation to urban infrastructure and addressing congestion and helping to ensure that families can get home more safely, on time, to increase productivity across our economy by dealing with congestion and those issues, then they come in and they criticise those types of investments. It's what we see from the Labor Party all of the time, of course, is a complete lack of consistency in that regard. Now, we have invested in this relation in terms of supporting Australians to be able to get the best possible outcomes in their lives.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Does the minister consider the allocation of 97% of the SME Export Hubs grants to coalition electorates constitutes quality spending? How can Australians trust you as Finance Minister to keep your word when the government's own record demonstrates your willingness to spend taxpayers' money in your political interests rather than the national interests?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr. President, I'll take the interjection from Senator Wong because it is absolutely taxpayers' money. We on this side have always recognised that it is taxpayers' money and that it needs to be handled carefully. It is why we made sure that we made steps through our early years in government to reduce the rate of growth in government spending, to tackle the structural deficits that had been left by the Labor Party, and by being careful with taxpayers' money, we created the circumstance where absolutely the economy had the resilience to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. We created the set of circumstances where we could invest record sums in supporting Australians through these unprecedented times, and in doing so still maintain Australia's AAA credit rating, maintain indeed an economic response that, along with the health response, is the envy of the world very much, and that is because of careful, consistent economic management over a long period of time that invests in the priorities for Australia.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. The allegations aired on Four Corners last night reveal a culture of sexism, cover-ups, abuse of power and behaviour that could constitute a breach of the ministerial standards. These are not issues of the past, as the Prime Minister characterised them today. This culture continues. This is the Parliament's Me Too moment, and it needs a strong response to ensure that women working in this building feel safe. Will the Prime Minister investigate the behaviour of all his ministers for compliance with the ministerial standards? And will he stand aside Ministers Tudge and Porter while conducting such an investigation?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. Can I echo
Order.
very much the words
Order.
of Senator Payne earlier in relation to the type of workplace that everyone should be able to expect to work in, whether they're working in this parliament, whether they're working across the public service, and whether they're working anywhere across the Australian economy, or indeed whether they're working elsewhere internationally, where Australia advocates for the highest of standards in terms of workplace practices. It is important that we have high standards and that they are adhered to. It's important that we have proper processes in terms of the way in which complaints can be lodged, dealt with and handled. That's why I would reiterate again that if a parliamentarian or a member of parliament has any concern about a workplace incident, then we do have public processes that are available to all staff in this place, to all members of parliament in this place, available on the Department of Finance website as to how they can access support and the process for reporting a complaint. Anybody in this building who feels that they have been bullied or harassed or who are concerned about a workplace incident should contact the Department of Finance, who will provide advice, support and assistance. They will also treat all complaints confidentially and thoroughly, which will be investigated independently of government. Employees in this building can also access the Employee Assistance Program, which is an independent, confidential professional counselling service that can provide staff with assistance in dealing with work and life issues. And these are all appropriate responses that have been built over a number of time, that are in place right now, and that I would urge all members to make sure their staff and others across this building are aware of.
Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Thanks, President. That existing complaints process is little known and too weak. You have to complain to your boss or to Finance, who then requires mediation with your boss, and Finance cannot take any disciplinary action against MPs or MOPS Act employees. Will the Prime Minister put in place a proper framework for reporting and investigating sexual misconduct so that women can come forward and without fear of reprisal?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I would urge the Leader of the Greens not to undermine the process that does exist, which is independent of government and does enable a confidential complaint to be raised. It is important that the Department of Finance maintains those protocols and principles, which they do. Having had the chance in the last couple of days and reason to ask questions about how these processes apply, I don't find out, as the responsible minister, who has made a complaint or who the complaint is against, because the independence is upheld and is of paramount importance through that process. So employees should have confidence in that regard. I would certainly welcome, Senator, if you want to talk to the Department of Finance about their processes, then we'll be happy to facilitate that type of meeting for you or anybody else across this building to make sure they have confidence that if there are issues complaints can be
Order.
raised
Senator
and put through the
Birmingham.
proper
Senator
process.
Waters, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, President. As Attorney-General, Minister Porter will be responsible for the government's response to the Australian Human Rights Commission's Respect at Work sexual harassment inquiry. Does the Prime Minister think Australian women can have confidence that these recommendations will be implemented by Minister Porter?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I'm sure the government will respond to that inquiry in the usual way, which involves consultation across all of the affected areas of government when it comes to such reports and responses to them. That will include consultation with Minister Payne's department and others that are relevant in terms of responding to such inquiries.
Senator Griff.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham, and relates to trade with China. South Australian lobsters were among tonnes of lobster left decomposing on the tarmac in China, allegedly due to customs delays. The Chinese government has subsequently used state media to confirm export suspensions on several products key to South Australia's economy, including the highly sought-after Southern Rock lobster, of which South Australia produces 53% of Australia's 3,000 metric tonnes. Has the Minister spoken with the Seafood Trade Advisory Group representing the industry to provide urgent assistance, and if not, why not?
Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. My office and agencies have certainly spoken with a number of different seafood industry representative organisations, businesses or the like. In terms of the particular name of the one you've referenced, Senator, I'll have to just double-check in terms of the consultation or engagement we've had there. There is no doubt that this is an industry facing a very stressful and challenging time. I addressed some of those issues in this place yesterday, as I have publicly on a number of occasions. We take very seriously the interruption to the timely passage of live seafood through Chinese ports. The absence of timely passage is obviously threatening to an industry who have time-sensitive, high-value products that require such timely passage through those customs processes. We don't deny the right of any importing nation to, of course, undertake appropriate quarantine and safety checks. Australia does so, and we respect the right of others to do so. But it needs to be done in a way that doesn't impede the ability of that trade to occur. They are the representations that we continue to make to China in relation to this issue, and we will certainly maintain pressure in terms of our expectations that any such processes or checks applied to any of our products, but in this case the live seafood trade, are undertaken in a manner that doesn't operate as a non-tariff trade barrier and effectively impede the trade as appears to be occurring right now in relation to those products.
Senator Griff, a supplementary question.
Minister, it would be an economic disaster if China also refuses to accept South Australian mined copper, our wheat, meat, seafood and our wine. Can the Minister advise the Senate of the total value of South Australian exports to China affected by these bans, and how many South Australian jobs could be at risk? Senator
Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I can advise that South Australia's exports to China in 2019-20 were worth approximately $3 billion. This had been a 12.5% increase on the previous year. And so though we are seeing disruption occur in a number of individual cases at present, and in certain sectors like barley at a more universal level, it is worth keeping in mind the fact that for the financial year not that long ago concluded, we did still see record volumes of trade facilitated across a number of different product categories. And that doesn't downplay the fact that we take very seriously where we are seeing interventions that we think disrupt the free flow of trade, hurt the flow of trade for Australian businesses, and that is why we are raising those concerns continuously with Chinese authorities in terms of seeking, through diplomatic or administrative channels, responses that can provide greater certainty to Australian exporters.
Senator Griff, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, have you met with your South Australian Trade counterpart Minister Stephen Patterson, or indeed the Premier Stephen Marshall, to discuss how these bans will affect South Australian agricultural goods and what they plan to do about it?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Look, I have had discussions with Premier Marshall and Minister Patterson in South Australia, as I have with some other ministers at a state and territory level around the country. They obviously all share the concerns that you have raised and that many Australians have in terms of the disruptive actions that appear to be being taken by some regulators in China at present, and the risk that those disruptive actions pose in terms of the free flow of trade. I can also confirm in relation to your primary question that my office has had engagement with the Seafood Trade Advisory Group, as has Assistant Minister Dunningham, who has particular responsibilities in terms of the fisheries sector, but is also Assistant Minister in working with me, and he has been engaged on a very regular basis in terms of dialogue with me and also with the seafood sector as we seek to work through these issues with them.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My question today is to the Finance Minister, Senator Birmingham. I refer this afternoon to the minister's comments during his appearance on Sky News on the 8th of October when he said, and I quote, "As Finance Minister myself, I will be acutely aware that the quality of spending is what matters most when it comes to how we invest." Does the minister consider a $5 million grant for small business Go Local First campaign, some of which it made its way to Liberal Party pollster Crosby Textor, to be quality spending?
Minister for Finance, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Pratt. Certainly, our side of politics sees small business as being an essential part of Australia's economy, an essential part of Australia's economy in terms of the jobs they create, the innovation that occurs, indeed the export growth that we have seen in recent years from Australia. I note very much in my role as Trade Minister that over recent years we have seen many thousands of additional Australian small and medium-sized businesses begin to export for the first time ever, and in doing so they're generating greater wealth for our country, but also all of the evidence shows that they tend also to be businesses who employ more people, who grow faster. Now, we also respect, Mr. President, the role of industry representative bodies, and I hear indeed Minister Cash talk about the important role that COSBOA plays in terms of advocacy and support for small businesses across Australia. We value engagement with them. We value working with them. We want to make sure that small business in Australia has its voice heard, and that's why we've acted through this time of crisis, Mr. President. Why we've acted through this time of crisis to make sure that Australian small businesses get the support they need. It will be small business who is a key driver for Australia out of the economic challenges that we face. Those opposite seem to forget that we're in the greatest global depression that we've seen since the Great Depression, the greatest global downturn that we've seen since those times. And so we won't apologise for getting in and supporting small business, for helping Australian small business, for helping their leadership as well in terms of ensuring that the policies that are applied across this country help them to grow, help them to create jobs, help to ensure, Mr. President, that we do achieve the strongest possible recovery for all Australians.
Senator Pratt, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Evidence at Senate estimates confirmed that long-term Liberal mate and former Crosby Textor pollster Jim Reid received more than $1 million in government market research contracts without even having to go to tender. So I ask, who recommended Mr. Reid to the Prime Minister's department? Was it the Prime Minister's office?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, I'm sure those sorts of questions were addressed in Senate estimates and are being addressed through questions on notice through Senate estimates. Mr. President, I'm confident that proper processes in accordance with all of the guidelines will have been followed, and those details, no doubt, will be provided.
Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Point of order, direct relevance. The minister was asked who recommended Mr. Reid, the Crosby Textor pollster, for this contract, which did not go to competitive tender. The fact that it was asked in estimates is not a response. He's the minister representing the Prime Minister. We want to know whether it was the Prime Minister's office.
I'm listening carefully. I've allowed you to remind the minister of the last part of the question. As I've said, as long as he remains directly relevant to part of the question, I can't direct him to answer another part, but I am listening carefully. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, what I was talking about there was indeed the fact that there has been much scrutiny of these sorts of programs during estimates, and I have every suspicion if we go back and look, there are probably these questions that were asked, may have been taken on notice, and will have been answered or will be answered on notice. Now, if they weren't and they need to be, I'll bring any details I can back to the chamber. But the Go Local First campaign is about providing encouragement to consumers to shop locally, to support their local small businesses, to ensure the viability of those small businesses, to strengthen economic activity in the local economy and community. That's what this sort of program is doing, and I would have thought those on that side should champion and support it.
Senator Pratt, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Can you confirm you've taken this question on notice? Can you confirm whether any of this research or polling was provided to the Prime Minister's office or to the Liberal Party? And if so, how is it appropriate for the Prime Minister's office to fund research for the Liberal Party of Australia?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, if there's anything that isn't being addressed already or hasn't been addressed through the Senate estimates process, then I will take that on notice and make sure it's addressed. But what I can confirm is important is that we absolutely back Australian small businesses to drive more consumers through their doors.
Order.
During
Senator
the course
Wong on a point of order.
Ducking and weaving. Direct relevance, Mr President. Mr President, direct relevance. How is it appropriate for the Prime Minister's office to fund research for the Liberal Party? There's no discussion about small business in this question.
On the point of order, there were several questions there. That was the last one. You are correct to say there was nothing that referenced the portfolio policy area that you mentioned, but the minister can be directly relevant to any part of the question. I will listen carefully, and he has 43 seconds remaining. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I'd address that if there are issues in relation to some of the elements that Senator Pratt raised, I'll bring those back to the chamber. But, Mr President, the point I was also making is the value of ensuring that we do get more Australians through the doors of Australian small businesses to help them get back on their feet. You know, thousands of Australian small businesses this year were closed down, mandatorily closed down by governments to help us deal with a global pandemic. In reopening the economy, we want to make sure those small businesses who went for months without revenue, without customers, without support, now get
Senator
people
Birmingham,
back through their
time for
doors
the
so
answer
they can
has
thrive
expired.
again.
Senator, order. Senator Scarr.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne. Can the minister update the Senate on the ways in which Australia's development program has pivoted to support our Indo-Pacific neighbours to meet the COVID challenge?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Scarr for his question. Mr President, given that the impact of COVID-19 in our region is so significant, our strong focus is on recovery. Partnerships for Recovery is targeted to health security, to stability and to economic recovery, the issues that our Pacific neighbours identify as their priorities, while protecting the most vulnerable, including women and girls and people with disabilities. Partnerships for Recovery frames our response, drawing on all of our national assets to support development, diplomatic, economic and security. I think our Pacific labour mobility programs are a good example of the shift that we've undertaken, where we've made immigration and quarantine, development policies all work together to keep this vital program going and to keep remittances flowing to the Pacific, as well as supporting the labour needs of regional and rural Australia. Mr President, in practical terms, our immediate response to COVID-19 involved a very substantial pivot of funds within our development program to respond to the most pressing needs of our region. We immediately rolled out our Indo-Pacific Response and Recovery Package. That included the distribution of PPE, critical medical services, and also the establishment of the Pacific Humanitarian Corridor to keep essential services flowing. Essential services, essential goods, essential people to ensure they were able to move around the key areas of the Pacific. This package was our first step. And overall, we directed in 2019-20 over 400 of approximately 1,000 development investments to direct COVID-19 support. A huge task, and I want to commend the highly professional DFAT teams at Posts and here in Australia on their efforts in what was a very significant undertaking to urgently address COVID-19.
Order. Senator Payne. Senator Scarr, a supplementary question.
Can the minister advise how Australia's development pivot is more than just an emergency response and will support the long-term recovery of our region?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. We know that Australia's own health, safety and security and prosperity is intertwined with that of our region. And so Partnerships for Recovery is more than an emergency response. In fact, on the 23rd of October, Minister Hawke and I announced 27 separate and detailed COVID-19 development response plans, a detailed blueprint for a shared recovery over the next 18 months. And in addition, the government has announced two major temporary supplementary initiatives. Firstly, a $304.7 million economic recovery package in the Pacific and Timor-Leste over 2 years. Secondly, a commitment over $500 million for procuring and delivering safe and effective vaccines for our partners in the Pacific, Timor-Leste and Southeast Asia. This complements our $80 million contribution to the Gavi COVAX Facility Advance Market Commitment. We know that a safe and effective vaccine will be the bedrock to our shared recovery.
Payne. Senator Scarr, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister describe the discussions the government has had with our Pacific and Southeast Asian neighbours about Partnerships for Recovery?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. And again, I thank Senator Scarr. Since the pandemic began, both the Prime Minister and I and many other ministers, Minister Hawke and many colleagues, have been working very closely with partners to shape our regional responses and, of course, our own Partnerships for Recovery, as I mentioned. That includes numerous bilateral calls made to ministerial counterparts in the first 3 months of the pandemic, as well as participating virtually in really important ASEAN and Pacific Island Forum meetings taking place even in the context of COVID-19. Our neighbours, like us, of course, see the value of working in close partnership to respond to this pandemic. As Fijian Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama said recently, Australia has stepped up with solidarity to ensure Pacific economies are not left behind. Timor-Leste Prime Minister Taumartin Ruak also issued a statement noting the Australian government and people's support and solidarity, noting also that Australia was, of course, dealing with COVID-19 issues ourselves and welcoming our response.
Senator Payne. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Attorney-General, Senator Payne. Minister, I'm sure you've heard of the former New South Wales Labor politician, Mr Eddie Obeid. Mr Obeid was a key player in the right faction of the ALP and a member of the state parliament for 20 years. Sadly, Mr Obeid wasn't there to serve the public interest, he was there to serve himself. He was using his inside knowledge and his connections to line up government decisions that would benefit himself and his family and raking in millions and millions of dollars in the process. Minister Obeid got caught out thanks to an anonymous tip-off to the New South Wales Anti-Corruption Commission. The tip-off sparked an inquiry, then a full investigation and public hearings about what had been going on. He's now behind bars. My question is this. If New South Wales had Mr Porter's proposed Integrity Commission instead of an ICAC with teeth, would there ever be an investigation on the actions of Eddie Obeid thanks to that tip-off?
The Minister representing the Attorney-General, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I may be mistaken, but I understand Mr Obeid to have left prison relatively recently. But let me go to the question in relation to the Integrity Commission. Just on the 2nd of November, Mr President, the government released an exposure draft of the legislation to establish the Commonwealth Integrity Commission, and that is released for extensive public consultation. That draft legislation is the result of very detailed planning to ensure that this new body has both the resources and the power that it needs to investigate allegations of criminal corrupt conduct that could occur across the public sector. I want to reinforce the government's commitment to a national comprehensive consultation process on the draft legislation. I understand that a series of consultation sessions is being arranged for the law enforcement and public sector groups that would be regulated under the legislation, as well as roundtable meetings with civil society representatives, academia and other stakeholder representatives from all states and territories. Those sessions will be held across a consultation period that will run from from November this year to March 2021. Mr President, what this indicates is the government's commitment to a body, as I said, that has both the resources and the power that it needs to investigate those allegations of criminal corrupt conduct that could occur across the public sector. We believe that our commission, which is properly designed, having gone through a robust consultation phase, will do the task that it is required to at the Commonwealth level. It will have greater investigatory powers than a royal commission, including the ability to hold hearings and to compel witnesses to testify. It will be the lead body in Australia's multi-agency anti-corruption framework and will include a public sector integrity division and a law enforcement integrity division, Mr President.
Senator Lambie, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Senator, the Victorian Anti-Corruption Commission is currently investigating the actions of Mr Adam Sumarek. He was a minister in the Premier Daniel Andrews government till he was booted out of the party over allegations of branch stacking. Branch stacking isn't illegal, but most Australians know that paying people to become members of your party so you can control who gets pre-selected is morally corrupt. If Victoria had Minister Porter's proposed Integrity Commission instead of their IBAC, would we ever have had an investigation into the actions of Mr Sumarek?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Lambie for her supplementary question. And I would reiterate the remarks I made during my first response to her initial question. The Commonwealth Integrity Commission, as I said, would be the lead body in our successful multi-agency anti-corruption framework. The Public Sector Integrity Division is the one that will have oversight of Commonwealth departments, of agencies and their staff, parliamentarians and their staff, to the question about 2 parliamentarians from Senator Lambie so far, the staff of federal judicial officers, as well as recipients of Commonwealth funds in appropriate circumstances. The structure of the Commission also ensures that the courts remain the sole arbiter of a person's guilt or innocence. In terms of the Law Enforcement Integrity Division, it will expand the jurisdiction of the ACLI and will have all of ACLI's existing powers and functions, including oversight of a range of agencies in that context, which I'm happy to go into if Senator Lambie wishes me to.
Senator Lambie, a final supplementary question.
Mr President, I'll rephrase my questions. As Mr Porter's proposed Integrity Commission stands, would Senator Maguire, using his position as a member for Wagga Wagga in New South Wales Liberal government to make money for himself and his associates, he was charging property developers a commission to line up meetings with public officials and grease the wheels on government approval processes. Would the public have ever found out about his abuse of public office and his close connection to the Premier if New South Wales was using Mr Porter's
time for the
proposed
question has expired. Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. I think given the factors that I have been through, particularly in relation to the Public Sector Integrity Division of the Commonwealth Integrity Commission, which includes the oversight of the behaviour of parliamentarians and their staff, as well as recipients of Commonwealth funds in appropriate circumstances, that those matters would indeed, if they were covered in the Commonwealth context. I would hasten to add that it was Mr Maguire, not Senator Maguire, in the Commonwealth context. If that is not the case, Senator, and I can provide any further information, I will take that on notice and return to the chamber.
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Last week, former New South Wales Auditor-General Tony Harris told the Sports Rorts Senate inquiry that, and I quote, "If the minister fell on the basis of the government's failure to administer this program properly, then the Prime Minister's involvement would be that the Prime Minister and or his office was involved in maladministration, at least. Why did the Sports Rorts scandal cost Senator Mackenzie her job, but the Prime Minister and other senior ministers keep theirs?"
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I think all of those issues were addressed at the time by the Prime Minister and indeed my predecessor in this place.
Senator Farrell, a supplementary question.
Yes, I do have one. Thank you, Mr President. Mr Harris told the inquiry, and I quote, "There appears to be, by design, not by accident, a drift towards reducing the scrutiny of government. I think it's a pattern of behaviour that constitutes a goal." Why is the Prime Minister reducing scrutiny across government by cutting funding to the National Audit Office?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I think I seem to recall, it's a sense of déjà vu. It's only my second day in the job here, but I have a sense that I was asked this question yesterday and I answered this question yesterday in pointing out that funding for the Australian National Audit Office keeps going up each and every year. That yes, as was well fleshed out, and congratulations to those opposite that at estimates they managed to flesh out that a government agency had indeed asked for more money in the budget process, hadn't got everything that it asked for. But don't go around pretending somehow that increasing funding each and every year into the forward estimates is by any means a cut. It's not. It's more money. It enables them to continue to do their job.
Senator Farrell, final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. I do have one. Mr Harris continued to tell the inquiry that the sports rorts scandal was, and I quote, "a very significant indicator that things are very poor in the state of government and would be dealt with by an effective anti-corruption commission." Why is the government deliberately dragging its feet on a National Integrity Commission that could investigate the misuse of taxpayers' money through scandals like sports rorts and airports rorts?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, indeed, my colleague Senator Payne just did detail to Senator Lambie the work that has been undertaken to establish a Commonwealth Integrity Commission and the draft legislation that was released for public consultation on the 2nd of November 2020. And I look forward to Senator Farrell, no doubt, being an active participant in that public consultation process. I'm sure Senator Farrell will make a detailed, thoughtful contribution to that process, and indeed the government has gone out for consultation because we recognise consultation on such a process is critical. Senator Farrell, you have until the 12th of February 2021 to make your thoughtful, detailed contribution and submission to this process, and the government will then work through the next appropriate stages in terms of how it is that we deliver an appropriate Commonwealth Integrity Commission that builds upon the many avenues of scrutiny that already exist across government and the public service. This is not about starting from scratch. It's recognising that there are a range of different scrutiny agencies already in place and building on.
Senator Abetz.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the Minister advise the Senate on how the Liberal National Government's strong budget management is delivering vital capability to our Australian Defence Force and jobs for our fellow Australians who work in the defence industry as we build a stronger economy?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Abetz for that question, and I also thank him for his tireless commitment to the ADF. Thank you. Mr President, protecting our nation's security and also our nation's sovereignty are essential preconditions for our nation's prosperity. The Morrison government is investing over $270 billion in Australia's defence capability over the next decade alone. This is the biggest investment in the ADF capability in many generations. This investment is meeting the challenge of our region's rapidly changing and also its deteriorating strategic environment. As Minister for Defence, my focus is now on ensuring Defence delivers the 3 new strategic objectives we have set them, that is to shape, to deter and to respond. I'm particularly proud our government has restored the defence budget to 2% of GDP, achieving a commitment we made in 2013. Defence and defence industry now have the certainty, the funding and also now the roadmap they need to deliver the 2024 structure plan. The defence budget is providing also an important contribution to the Australian economy and to Australian jobs. Over 15,000 companies now support defence, and that is over 70,000 Australian workers, and that number is increasing even during COVID-19 this year. So with investments like this, We've got a $1 billion COVID economic recovery package supporting 4,000 Australian jobs, and our local industry capability plans are now awarding 73% of infrastructure work to local businesses. Defence, through the leadership of this government, is rising to the challenge to build a stronger nation and provide an important and enduring contribution to our nation's economy.
Senator Abetz, a supplementary question.
I thank the Minister for her comprehensive answer. Further, can the Minister update the Senate on the government's delivery of our defence capability since the 2016 Defence White Paper?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank Senator Abetz again for that question. Since the 2016 Defence White Paper, this government has approved more than 400 capability decisions worth over $122 billion. We are building a stronger nation by bolstering Australia's defence capability, and this is backed by real funding with a belief, an absolute belief in Australian companies and in Australian workers. The Morrison government's national security agenda unashamedly puts Australia's defence capability first, for now and for the next many decades to come. And we are, unlike those opposite in government, we are getting on with the job. We are building over 70 ships in Australia. 70 ships in Australia. We are manufacturing hundreds of combat vehicles in Queensland. And as I said, we are supporting the jobs of over 70,000 Australians. Australians can trust this government to deliver at the ADF capability we need.
Senator Abetz, a final supplementary question.
Finally, can the Minister inform the Senate why it is important to provide certainty for our defence budget?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I certainly can. It is critically important to make sure that defence and defence industry in this nation have funding and program certainty, because that allows us to back in our defence strategy with credible force. It allows us to maintain our capability edge, and it also allows us to invest in a far more resilient Australian sovereign industrial base here, right in Australia. And let us never, ever forget the legacy we inherited from those opposite in 2013. Under those opposite two white papers, they stripped out $18 billion from the defence budget, and the defence budget was cut to the lowest level since 1938, to 1.56% of GDP. Not only did they take $18 billion out, they cut, they delayed and they cancelled 170 capabilities, deployable health, Collins sonar upgrades and maritime strike
Senator
weapons.
Reynolds,
and under
time
them,
for the answer has expired. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Almost 3 years after it started work on it, 2 years after it committed to implementing it, and almost 12 months after the deadline it set itself, the Morrison government finally released its draft bill to establish a National Integrity Commission last week, blaming the delay on COVID, which hit our shores 8 months ago. Why has the Morrison government been dragged kicking and screaming to legislate for a National Integrity Commission?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Brown, and obviously it's going to be a very good submission to the consultation process because Senator Farrell is going to have Senator Brown helping him draft it and contribute. The government, as indeed Senator Payne has outlined in question time already, and as I have outlined in question time already, has published the draft legislation, opened up a consultation process, and the first stage there is underway. The Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity will be given jurisdiction over 4 new agencies from the 1st of January 2021. So whilst we are going through that process of consultation about the legislation for the Commonwealth Integrity Commission, we also will ensure that the ATO, ASIC, APRA and the ACCC have that oversight of the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity as well. In the 2020-21 budget, we provided $9.9 million to the Commission and an additional 38 ASL to help them expand their jurisdiction over these agencies. In terms of budgeting, the Commonwealth Integrity Commission has some allocation of more than $106 million of new funding allocated to it over the forward estimates from 2019-20. which is in addition to the funding being provided for the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity. In contrast to the fact that Labor had come out with design principles, we have come out with draft legislation, a detailed proposal in terms of how this will apply, how it will work and how it builds on the existing accountability and integrity measures that are in place. We want to make sure that we don't go and duplicate, that we don't reinvent, but that we do establish the type of structure that ensures we get the most out of the existing mechanisms and address any other absences or gaps that may exist.
Senator Brown, a supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Experts have criticised the government's draft bill, saying it is, and I quote, the weakest watchdog in the country, designed to cover up corruption, not expose it, and that, and I quote, the real reason for that is that they're afraid of it and how it might affect them. End quote. What is the Morrison government so afraid of?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we're not afraid of anything. We're determined to get things right. And we're determined to go through the right process in terms of how we go about this and to build upon those existing infrastructure that exists in terms of the scrutiny of government at all its levels, the accountability of government at all its levels. This is our determination that we do bring this forward and achieve the right balance, Mr President. The right balance between, indeed, what are sometimes criticised as star chambers in terms of the way other ICAC-type structures operate, or indeed others that are criticised in different ways. And what we want to ensure through this process, and what the Attorney-General is carefully stepping through his consultations with the public, is to make sure we get it right in terms of how it operates and how it operates in tandem and alongside all of those other agencies. And we look forward to the Labor Party providing its detailed submission on that.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Brown, a final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Will the Morrison government guarantee the establishment of a National Integrity Commission in this term of government?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr President, that of course will depend upon the process of the legislation through this place. It is a brave person, Mr President, who predicts how this parliament will react, particularly this chamber, Mr President. So I commit that we will do as the Attorney-General has outlined in terms of draft legislation being out there, the consultation process being underway, the opportunity for all and sundry, including the Australian Labor Party, to make a detailed submission in that regard. For Senator Farrell and for Senator Brown and Senator Wong, if she wants to chime in as well, can all make their detailed submission to the process. And then, given it was draft legislation, we will update it following that consultation process and bring it to the parliament, and then it is, like all legislation in this place, subject to the will of the parliament.
Senator Antich.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Minister, can you please update the Senate on the progress of the Morrison government's $1 billion job trainer fund and how this program is ensuring Australia has the skilled workforce it needs for economic recovery?
Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Antic for his question. And, Mr President, the Prime Minister has made it very clear our recovery from COVID-19 is well and truly a skills-led recovery. We need to ensure that businesses, industry, employers in Australia have the employees with the requisite skills that they need. And that is why the Morrison government is investing this year alone a record $7 billion in our vocational education and training system within Australia. And of course this includes our job trainer skills package, but along with the wage subsidies that we're putting in place, including the boosting apprentices and trainees commencements measures, but of course also the supporting apprentices and trainees measures that we have put in place. But as part of our job trainer package, we have put in place, partnering with the states and territories, we will deliver around 340,000 additional training places to our vocational education and training system. And the key to these places, though, are that they are in areas of actual labour market need. And we have worked closely with the individual states and territories to determine on the ground in those states and territories what are the additional training places that they need. And I'm very pleased to inform the Senate that with Victoria lifting their restrictions, all states and territories are now signed up to Job Trainer. And in fact, training is now being delivered in South Australia, Western Australia and New South Wales. With these 3 states alone, what we already have coming online is an additional 200,000 training places. And, Mr President, in my home state of Western Australia, the first data, it was only launched in September, 7,868 enrolments already. People actually want to train in areas of labour market
Senator
demand.
Cash. Senator Antic, supplementary question.
Minister, how does this substantial investment in new skills training build upon the work the government has taken to support small businesses to keep apprentices in training through the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. And one of the very first actions that the government took at the outset of COVID-19 was to ensure that our small businesses were able to keep their apprentices and trainees on the job in training where we need them to be. And we, of course, put in place our Supporting Apprentices and Trainees Wage Subsidy. It commenced in April of this year and it runs through until March next year. As at the 5th of November, this measure alone has supported over 55,600 businesses, the majority of them being small businesses, and we are retaining over 97,900 apprentices and trainees on the job. And in fact, Mr President, to date, over 20,000 bricklayers, 15,000 electricians, 10,000 plumbers, 5,000 hairdressers and 8,000 automotive mechanics have been supported through this wage subsidy. They have been kept on the job in those businesses because of the actions the Morrison government took.
Senator Antic, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, as we emerge from the economic impacts of COVID-19, how will the government's Job Maker budget build on our record of skills reform and support new apprentices into training?
Senator Cash.
Well, thank you, Mr President. And in addition to the measure of the Supporting Apprentices and Trainees, to keep them on the job, as a government we understand we now need to encourage new commencements to occur to ensure that pipeline of skilled workers. And in doing that, we have now invested in a $1.2 billion Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Wage Subsidy. This will create around 100,000 new training opportunities for Australians across Australia. What we've done is we've said to employers of any size, in any industry, in any location in Australia, they are able to access the wage subsidy to sign up new apprentices and trainees. The wage subsidy is a substantial wage subsidy. It is 50% of the apprentice's wage, flowing through until the 30th of September next year. We will ensure apprentices and trainees are kept on the job, but also new apprentices and trainees come into the pipeline.
Order. Senator Cash. Time for the answers expired. Senator Birmingham.
Thank you.